The night was cold, and the wind moved like a wild beast across the frozen land. Snow covered the streets, and every step made a sharp crunch under heavy boots. A lone traveler walked slowly toward the only light in this empty town. A small, broken tavern that stood in the middle of the snow desert. His coat was thick, his sword heavy on his back, and his eyes looked tired. But inside those eyes lived a fire, a man who had seen too much. The tavern door opened with a long creak, and the warmth of smoke and drink filled the air. Inside, drunk aliens shouted, laughed, and fought with each other. The place smelled of firewood, sweat, and strange drinks that burned like acid. The traveler moved quietly to the counter and asked for water. Everyone turned and stared at him, for no one here ever asked for water. In the corner of the tavern, one alien sat shaking with laughter. His skin was green, his eyes blood red, and his voice was thick with drink. In front of him, chained and shivering, sat two young alien girls. Their skin was a soft violet glow, their hair long and silver, their eyes filled with sadness. They looked weak, cold, and lost, but their beauty was brighter than the fire in the room. The drunk alien slammed his cup and shouted, "One drink! Give me one drink, and they are yours!" The tavern fell silent. The traveler turned slowly, his hand resting on his sword. He looked at the girls. They clung to each other like broken birds, their hands shaking, their lips whispering silent prayers. He asked, "Why?" The alien laughed. "Because they are nothing. Worthless. Too much trouble for me. I sell them for one drink. Take them, stranger, if you dare." The traveler's mind turned. He was not a man to buy slaves, not a man to deal in lives. But the eyes of the girls pierced him deeper than any blade. They were begging without words, begging for freedom. The tavern wait. Every alien waiting to see his choice. Would he walk away, or would he take the deal? Slowly, the traveler lifted his hand and placed a silver coin on the counter. "Give him a drink," he said, his voice calm. The bartender nodded, poured the drink, and placed it before the drunk alien. The deal was done. The girls gasped softly, their chains removed, and they stumbled forward into the traveler's shadow. Their hands clung to his coat, their eyes filled with tears. The drunk alien laughed harder, swallowing the drink in one gulp. "You fool! You will regret this! They will not leave you now, not ever!" he shouted. The tavern roared with laughter, but the traveler only turned and walked toward the door. The two girls followed, holding each other, never letting go. The cold wind hit their faces as they stepped outside into the dark snowstorm. The traveler stopped in the street, looking down at the two. "You are free now," he said. "You can go wherever you wish. I owe you nothing." But the girls shook their heads, their eyes wide with fear. One whispered in broken human words, "No, safe with you." The other added, "We cannot go back, never." He frowned, his heart heavy. Why would they stay with him, a stranger? He was no savior, no hero, yet they clung to him as if his shadow was their only home. The wind howled louder, snow cutting across their faces, and in the distance shadows moved, dark shapes walking in the storm. The traveler's hand tightened on his sword. Something was wrong. The girls trembled, pressing closer to him. Their bodies shook not only from the cold, but from fear. They knew the shadows. They knew who followed. The traveler asked, "Who are they?" But the girls only whispered one word, a word filled with terror: hunters. The traveler looked into the storm, his breath turning to ice. The drunk alien's laughter echoed in his memory. "You will regret this," the words repeated inside his mind. Now he understood. The deal was not only strange, it was a trap. These girls were not only victims, they were also a curse that had just become his burden. The tavern behind them glowed in the distance, but before him, the storm carried danger. The girls held his arms tighter, their tears freezing on their cheeks, and in the darkness of the snow, the hunters drew closer, step by step. The traveler stood ready, sword in hand. He had no plan, no reason to fight, but he could not let them be taken. The first part of his story had begun, and it began with a strange deal. The night swallowed the road as the traveler moved through the storm. Snow whipped against his face, cutting like tiny blades. The two alien girls walked close beside him, their arms tight around each other, their eyes wide with fear. Their breath came in small clouds, their steps weak, yet they never let go of him. The traveler looked at them again, confused. "You are free," he said, his voice low against the wind. "You do not have to follow me." But they shook their heads, their silver hair whipping in the storm. One girl whispered in broken words, "Safe with you." The other added, "If leave, we die." Their voices carried something more than fear. It was not just about safety, it was about survival. The traveler narrowed his eyes. He knew the shadows in the snow had not been a dream. Someone was following, someone who wanted these girls. But why? They reached an old broken barn on the edge of the frozen town. The traveler pushed the door open, and the wind howled behind him. Inside, the place was dark, filled with the smell of old wood and dust. He lit a small flame, enough to see the walls cracked and the roof half open. To the night, the girls sat close to the fire, shivering, their violet skin glowing faintly in the light. For a moment, the traveler watched them. They looked fragile, too fragile for this cruel land. And yet, behind their fear, there was something else, something strange. He saw how their eyes glowed softly, not like humans, not like any creature he knew. It was as if light lived inside them. He looked away, but he could not stop wondering. The girls huddled together, holding each other's hands. The younger one spoke softly. "Hunters always follow." Her words were simple, broken, but the meaning was clear. The traveler leaned forward. "Why do they follow you?" The older girl lowered her head, her hair covering her face. "They want us back. We escaped," she whispered. The fire cracked, as if answering. The traveler's jaw tightened. He had seen slavery before. He had seen cruelty. But something told him this was different. The drunk alien had not sold them as slaves. Not really. He had given them away like they were poison, and now these hunters were searching the storm to claim them. Outside, the wind shifted. The traveler froze, his hand on the hilt of his sword. The girls pressed close to him, fear burning in their glowing eyes. A shape moved across the window, just a shadow, but enough to make the heart pound. The traveler stood, his blade drawn. He whispered to the girls, "Stay behind me." The barn door creaked, slow and heavy. Snow poured in, and with it, 3 figures in black armor, their faces hidden, their voices sharp. "Return what is ours," one hissed, his words cold as steel. The traveler raised his sword, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "They are not yours," he said. The hunters stepped closer, weapons drawn. The girls trembled, clinging tighter. The fight came fast, steel clashed, sparks flew, the barn filled with noise and fury. The traveler moved like a shadow, his blade striking true. 1 hunter fell, but 2 more pressed harder, their blades sharp and strong. The girls screamed, their voices cutting through the storm like broken glass. And then, something happened. The older girl raised her hand without thinking. A burst of light exploded from her palm, blinding white against the dark. The hunter screamed as his armor burned, his body falling to ash in the snow. The younger girl's eyes glowed bright blue. The fire grew wild around them. The traveler turned in shock, realizing they were no helpless girls. Inside them lived power, raw and dangerous. The last hunter staggered back, fear now in his eyes. He ran into the storm, disappearing into the night. The barn went silent except for the sound of fire and breathing. The girls collapsed to the ground, weak from what they had done. The traveler stood frozen, his sword still in his hand. He looked at them, truly looked. They were not slaves, not victims, not ordinary beings. They were something far greater, something the hunters would kill worlds to claim. The younger girl lifted her head, her voice trembling. "We cannot leave you," she whispered. "We are bound now," the older one added, her eyes glowing faintly even as tears fell. The traveler felt the weight of their words press deep into his chest. He had not chosen this bond, but it had been made, and breaking it would bring death to them, and maybe to him too. The wind howled again, louder, fiercer. The storm outside was not ending, and the hunters would return, stronger and many more. The traveler sat near the fire, the girls leaning close against him. Their fear was clear, but their trust was stronger. They would not leave. Not now. Not ever. And in that moment, the traveler knew one thing. This was no accident. The deal in the tavern had not been chance. He had stepped into a fate larger than himself. The bond of fear was only the beginning. The storm raged outside the barn. Snow blew through the cracks in the broken roof. The fire burned low, shadows dancing across the walls. The traveler sat with his sword across his knees, his eyes fixed on the door. Beside him, the 2 alien girls leaned against each other, their breaths slow and weak. But even in their weakness, their glowing eyes never left him. The silence was heavy, broken only by the wind. The traveler knew the hunters would return. He had killed 2, scared 1 away, but enemies like that never gave up. If they wanted the girls so badly, they would come again, and this time, they would come with more. The older girl stirred, her voice soft but clear. "They know where we are," she whispered. The traveler looked at her. How? She pointed to her chest, where faint blue light glowed beneath her skin. They can feel us, always. The words carried a weight that made the fire seem colder. The younger girl spoke too, her voice trembling. They will not stop, never, until we are caught. Her eyes shined with tears, and she pressed close to her sister. The traveler's jaw tightened. His life had always been hard, but now it was tangled with theirs. He had made a deal he could not walk away from. Suddenly, the night shattered. The barn walls shook with a heavy thud. The sound of alien horns echoed through the storm. The traveler stood at once, sword in hand. Through the cracks in the wood, he saw shapes moving in the snow. 5, 6, maybe more, armored hunters approaching fast. The girls gasped, their fear rising. The older one whispered, "We must run." The traveler nodded, grabbing his pack and kicking open the barn's back door. The storm hit them hard, snow biting their skin, wind howling in their ears. They ran across the frozen fields, the ground cracking under their boots. Behind them, the hunters shouted, their voices sharp like blades. The chase had begun. Snow swallowed their tracks, but the hunters were fast. Strange alien hounds barked, their glowing eyes cutting through the dark. The traveler pushed the girls forward, his sword flashing in the storm as one beast leaped too close. With one strike, he split it down, blood steaming in the snow. But more came, faster, louder, their claws tearing through the night. The girls stumbled, their bodies weak, but the traveler grabbed their hands, pulling them forward. "Run!" he shouted, his voice fierce. The storm was thick, but not enough to hide them. The hunters' shadows grew closer, dark figures moving like wolves. Arrows flew through the air, one slicing past the traveler's arm. He gritted his teeth, the wound burning, but he did not slow. The older girl cried out, her steps faltering. Her sister held her, but they were falling behind. The traveler turned, eyes blazing. For a heartbeat, time slowed. He saw the hunters closing in, saw the fear on the girls' faces, and he knew he had to make a choice, fight or flee. He let go of fear and raised his sword. "Keep running," he shouted to them. The girls hesitated, their glowing eyes refusing to leave him, but he stepped forward into the storm, swinging his blade against the first hunter who reached them. Steel met steel, sparks flew, blood stained the snow. The traveler fought like a man possessed, every strike carrying fire and fury. But then, something strange happened. As the girls cried out, their fear burst into light. The older one raised her hands, and the storm itself seemed to twist around her. Snow lifted like a wall, blinding the hunters. The younger one screamed, and her voice cracked the air like thunder. Bolts of blue light shot from her eyes, striking 2 hunters to the ground. The traveler froze for an instant. He had seen power before, but nothing like this. These girls were no victim. They were weapons, but their bodies shook with weakness, their energy burning them from the inside. If they kept using such power, it would kill them. The hunters howled in rage, more pouring from the storm. The traveler grabbed the girls, pulling them close. "This way," he shouted, dragging them into a narrow canyon cut through the ice. The walls rose high, blocking the wind, but the sound of pursuit echoed louder than ever. They stumbled through the dark passage, the girls leaning on him. Behind them, the hunters' footsteps grew closer, faster, relentless. At last, they reached the end of the canyon. But instead of escape, a cliff stretched before them. The land dropped into a frozen river far below, the water black and deadly. The girls gasped, their hands clinging to him tighter. The hunters' torches burned behind, shadows filling the canyon. There was no way back, no way forward, only the fall. The traveler looked at the girls, their glowing eyes wide with terror. He tightened his grip on his sword, his breath cold in the air. The choice pressed heavy on him, fight to the death here, or jump into the unknown. The hunters laughed behind them, voices echoing like demons. The traveler stepped to the edge, the storm howling in his ears, and with the girls at his side, he whispered, "Hold on." Then he leaped. The fall was long and the wind screamed in their ears. The traveler held both girls close, their small hands clutching his coat like it was their last hope. The frozen river below rose fast, black water breaking against sharp ice. Then with a crash, they hit the surface, cold burning through skin and bone. The traveler fought against the icy current, pulling the girls above the water. They coughed, shivered, their glowing eyes filled with fear, but they did not let go of him. Through the storm and waves, he dragged them toward the riverbank. At last they crawled onto the snow, their bodies shaking, their lips blue from the cold. The hunters' shouts echoed above the cliffs, but no one dared to jump. For now, they were safe, hidden by the river and the storm. The traveler gathered wood with frozen fingers. Soon, a fire burned between them, flames rising against the dark night. Its warmth fought the frost, shadows flickering across their tired faces. The girls huddled close to the fire, their silver hair dripping with ice water. The traveler studied them, their fragile bodies, their glowing skin. Finally, he asked, "What are you?" His voice was steady, but his eyes sharp. The older girl lifted her head, her lips trembling. "We are from another world," she said softly. Her voice carried pain, as if each word cost her something. The younger one pressed her face into her sister's shoulder, whispering, "They took us from our home long ago." The traveler listened, his eyes narrowing. He had seen slaves from far-off places, but this felt different. These girls were not only prisoners, they were hunted for something more. The older girl looked into the fire. "Our world was dying, but we were chosen. Our blood holds power." She raised her hand and faint blue sparks danced across her palm. "Power that many want. Power that makes us prisoners." The traveler leaned close, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "And why stay with me? Why not run alone?" The younger girl finally lifted her face, her eyes glowing with tears. "Because you fight for us. Not like others," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but her meaning was strong. "We are bound now. If we leave, they will find us fast. But with you, maybe we live." The traveler stared into the fire, the weight of their words pressing on him. He had not asked for this, but fate had tied their lives together. The fire burned higher as the storm roared outside. The girls leaned closer, as if afraid the flames would vanish if they let go. The traveler looked at their glowing eyes and thought of the hunters. If what they said was true, they were more than refugees. They were keys to something greater, and every enemy in the stars wanted them. The older girl whispered again, "They will keep coming until we are taken or dead." The younger one shivered, pressing her hands to the fire. "We cannot stop them alone." The traveler clenched his fists, his sword lying beside him. He had walked many roads, fought many battles, but this path was different. This was not only survival, this was destiny. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The traveler thought of the tavern, of the drunk alien's laugh. "You will regret this." Those words still haunted him, but as he looked at the girls, he saw something else. Not a curse, not a burden, but two lives that had chosen him, lives that now depended on him. The storm outside began to fade. The fire's glow reflected on the walls of stone around them. For the first time, the traveler noticed strange carvings hidden in the rock. Symbols glowing faintly in the firelight, marks older than any he had seen. The girls' eyes widened, their lips parting in shock. "This is ours," the older one whispered. Her hand traced the glowing lines. "This place remembers us." The traveler frowned, watching as the walls lit brighter. The fire flickered, answering the strange symbols. The younger girl gasped, her voice trembling. "It is a fortress, a hidden place from long ago." The walls seemed to breathe with energy. The traveler felt the weight of old power pressing on his chest. The girls looked at him with shining eyes. "You led us here," they said together. The traveler shook his head. "I only followed the river." But they shook theirs, their voices soft and certain. "No, this is not chance. You were meant to find this place." The fire burned hotter, the walls glowing like the heart of a star. The traveler felt a chill deeper than the cold outside. Fate had pushed him into something far larger than a simple deal in a tavern. He had not only taken two alien girls, he had opened a door that should have stayed closed. The girls leaned close, their violet faces lit by the strange fire, their voices soft, but their eyes unblinking. "You are part of this now," they whispered. The traveler looked into the flames, his hand tightening on his sword. Outside, in the storm, the hunters searched. But inside the fortress, a new power was waking, and with it, secrets too heavy to carry. The storm had slowed, but the night was still heavy with cold. Inside the cave, the fire burned brighter than it should, its flames dancing in strange colors. The walls glowed with alien carvings, symbols alive with hidden energy. The traveler watched in silence, his hand never far from his sword. The two alien girls stood near the walls, their fingers tracing the glowing lines, their eyes wide with wonder, their lips moving as if whispering to the stones. The younger girl looked back at him, her silver hair shining in the strange light. "This place knows us," she said softly. The older one nodded, her voice stronger than before. "It is a fortress, built by our people long ago, to protect what was left of us." The traveler frowned, his eyes sweeping across the chamber. Stone pillars rose like frozen giants, and in the center stood an altar made of crystal. It pulsed faintly, like a heart still alive. The girls stepped closer to the altar, their hands touched its surface, and the glow spread across the floor like ripples in water. The traveler tightened his grip on his sword. Every instinct told him this was not safe, but the girls turned to him, their eyes shining. "You are meant to be here with us," the older one whispered. He shook his head, his voice hard. "I am only a man. I am not meant for this." But the girls stepped closer, their small hands reaching for him. "You chose us when no one else would," the younger one said. "And because of that, this place opens for you." The traveler looked at them, their faces so young, yet their eyes carried the weight of 1,000 years. He had seen many strange things in his life, but never this. The fire cracked and the glow grew stronger. The fortress was alive, answering to them, binding itself to him, and he could feel it, like invisible chains wrapping around his soul. Then the sound came, distant at first, but growing louder, echoing through the storm outside. The deep thud of alien drums, the clash of armor, the howl of beasts. The traveler's eyes narrowed, his instincts sharp. "They have found us," he said. The girls froze, fear flooding their glowing eyes. "They come with many," the older one whispered. "Too many," the younger added, her voice breaking. The traveler moved to the entrance, the cold wind slashing his face, far in the distance. Through the snow, torches burned, dozens, maybe hundreds of hunters marching across the ice. The fortress stood tall, hidden in shadows, but it would not remain secret for long. The traveler returned to the fire, his jaw set. "This fortress can hide us, can it not?" The older girl shook her head. "It will hide only if you accept it." The traveler frowned. "Accept what?" She pointed to the glowing altar. "You must bind yourself to us, to this place. Only then will the fortress protect us." The words fell heavy in the chamber. The traveler looked at the altar, its light pulsing stronger now, calling to him. He hesitated, his heart torn. Binding meant giving up freedom, tying his life to theirs. He had lived by his own will for years, free, but alone. Now these two girls, these strangers, asked him to choose their fate over his. The fire cracked, and outside the drums grew louder. The fortress trembled as if waiting for his answer. The younger girl stepped forward, her voice trembling. "We cannot survive without you," her sister added. "If you walk away, they will take us, and you will die too, for they will never let you go." Their words burned like fire in his chest. The traveler looked at them, their violet faces glowing in the strange light. In their eyes, he saw not only fear but hope that he would not abandon them. He walked slowly to the altar. The crystal surface pulsed as his hand drew near. The girls stood beside him, their small hands gripping his coat. "Together," they whispered. His palm touched the crystal, and the chamber exploded with light. The fortress roared like a beast awakening after a long sleep. Walls of ice rose higher, doors of stone sealed shut. The hunters' drums echoed outside, but the fortress answered with thunder. The traveler staggered back, his heart racing. The bond had deepened, stronger than chains, stronger than blood. The fortress had accepted him, tied his soul to the girls, and to itself. Now they were one, their lives bound together by power older than memory. Outside, the hunters reached the frozen cliffs. Their leader raised a torch, his voice booming across the snow. "Come out, thief! Give us what is ours, and you may live." His words carried through the storm, but the fortress walls stood unshaken. The traveler stood tall, sword in hand, the girls at his side, their eyes glowing brighter than fire. Inside, the fire burned hot, the walls pulsed with power. The traveler knew the fight was coming. A war he could not escape. The fortress had chosen him. The girls had bound themselves to him. And outside, an army waited to tear it all apart. The night grew darker, the snow fell harder, and the fortress whispered with voices of the past. The bond was sealed, but survival was far from certain. The frozen fortress had awakened, and so had the war. The night was not silent anymore. The hunters' drums thundered through the frozen valley, echoing against the cliffs like the heartbeat of war. Torches moved like rivers of fire across the snow, an army of shadows marching closer. The frozen fortress stood tall, its walls glowing faintly with hidden power, its stones alive with ancient strength. Inside, the traveler stood with his sword ready. The two alien girls clung to his sides, their violet faces glowing in the strange light of the fortress walls. They were no longer shaking from fear, but their eyes held a fierce determination. The younger whispered, "They are many," the older added, "but the fortress will stand with us." The traveler felt the bond burning in his chest. Since he had touched the crystal altar, the fortress was alive inside him. Its energy pulsed through his veins, tying him to the girls, binding their fates as one. He could feel its walls, its strength, its hidden weapons, and he knew this would not be an easy fight. The first impact shook the gates. A heavy battering ram slammed against the ancient doors, sending cracks across the frozen sea. Tone, the girls cried out, their hands pressed to the walls as if feeling the fortress's pain. The traveler raised his blade, his eyes sharp. "They will come through," he said, "and when they do, we fight." The gates groaned again. The hunters roared, their voices full of hunger. They wanted the girls, they wanted the power in their blood, and they would not stop until they had it. The traveler stood at the center of the chamber, his breath steady. He had fought battles before, but never like this. Now he fought not only for himself, but for them. The doors burst open with a crash. Hunters poured in, armored in black, their weapons gleaming in the firelight. The traveler moved first, his sword flashing like lightning. Steel clashed against steel, sparks showered across the stone floor. One hunter fell, then another, but more pressed forward, their numbers endless, their rage unbroken. The girls raised their hands. The older one called on the fortress, her eyes glowing bright blue. Ice spears burst from the ground, striking hunters down, freezing their bodies solid. The younger screamed, her voice trembling with power. Flames rose from the fire pit, swirling into a storm that burned through the invaders. The chamber shook with fury, fire and ice colliding with blood and steel. The traveler fought beside them. Every strike of his sword echoed with the fortress's power. He felt stronger, faster, guided by something beyond himself. The hunters fell in waves, their cries filling the air. But still, more came, climbing over the bodies of their fallen, their eyes hungry for the prize. A massive hunter entered, taller than the rest, his armor black as night. He swung a heavy blade, striking the traveler back. The impact shook his bones, his body slammed against the stone. The girls screamed, their hands glowing brighter. The older unleashed a wave of ice, but the giant smashed through it, his strength unstoppable. The younger threw fire, but he cut through the flay. Mez, his roar shaking the walls. The traveler rose again, blood on his lips, his grip tightened on his sword. His eyes burning with defiance, he charged, clashing with the giant once more. Their blades met, sparks exploding like stars. The fortress walls pulsed with light, answering the bond. The girls poured their energy into him, their glow surrounding his body like a shield. With a final cry, the traveler drove his sword through the giant's chest. The hunter fell with a crash, shaking the chamber. But the victory was short. Outside, the drums grew louder, and the ground trembled under heavy footsteps. The girls staggered, their energy fading, their glowing eyes dimming. "We cannot hold much longer," the older whispered. "They will break us," the younger cried. The traveler pulled them close, his voice fierce. "No," he said. "We stand until the end." The girls looked at him, their tears glowing in the firelight. "We will not lose you," they whispered, "even if it kills us." The gates cracked again. More hunters stormed in. The fortress walls groaned, its ancient strength beginning to break. The traveler raised his sword once more. The girls pressed their hands together, their bodies glowing brighter than ever before. A storm of fire and ice exploded from them, tearing through the invaders. The chamber became a battlefield of light and death. The traveler fought like a shadow in the storm. The girls burned like stars, their power both beautiful and terrifying. Hunters fell screaming. The fortress shook, the air filled with smoke and ice. The battle raged without end, and in the chaos, the traveler knew the truth. This was not only a fight for survival, this was a war for destiny. The fortress roared with them, its voice thundered across the mountains. But even as the enemies fell, more shadows moved outside. The army was endless, the walls could not hold forever. And the bond between them burned hotter, brighter, heavier. Their last stand had begun. The fortress trembled as if the mountains themselves were breaking. Hunters screamed in rage outside, their torches burning brighter, their drums beating faster. Inside, the floor cracked, the walls shook, the air heavy with smoke, frost, and blood. The traveler stood with his sword drawn, his chest heaving, his face marked with sweat and ash. Beside him, the two alien girls leaned against each other, their glowing eyes dim but still burning with fire. The last wave of hunters inside the chamber lay broken, bodies scattered across the stone, frozen in ice or burned to ash, but the fortress groaned as if it could no longer hold the weight of war. The traveler looked at the girls, his voice rough. "We cannot win this forever." The older girl shook her head, her voice low but steady. "There is one way," she whispered. The younger one clutched his hand, her small fingers shaking. "But it will change everything." The traveler's eyes narrowed. "What way?" he demanded. The girls exchanged a long look, their faces pale in the dying firelight. The older one spoke, her voice heavy like stone. If you stay with us, the bond will complete. The fortress will rise, and we will never be hunted again. The younger added, her voice trembling. But if you choose freedom, the bond will break, and we will die. The chamber went silent. Only the distant drums echoed, their rhythm like the ticking of fate. The traveler stared into the fire, his jaw tight, his heart heavy. He had always walked alone, his life free but empty. Now these two girls had bound themselves to him. They had given him their trust, their power, their very lives. The older girl touched his arm, her eyes glowing faintly. You gave us hope when no one else did, she whispered. You did not treat us as slaves. You treated us as living. The younger one pressed closer, her tears glowing as they slid down her violet scarf. We are not afraid to die, but we are afraid to lose you. The traveler felt their words like blades in his chest. He had never asked for this bond, but it was his now, and in their eyes he saw more than fear. He saw family, something he had never known. He looked at the altar, still pulsing faintly like a living heart. The choice lay before him, and the fortress waited. Outside, the hunters roared, their leader's voice booming across the snow. Give them to us, and you may live. His words thundered into the fortress, but the traveler's eyes burned with fire. He turned to the girls, his voice steady. I will not give you away. I will not walk away. The girls gasped, their glowing eyes flooding with tears. You choose us? The younger whispered. The traveler nodded. Yes, he said. I choose you. The altar blazed with light. The fortress roared like thunder, its walls rising higher, stronger, brighter. The bond seared through his body, through theirs. Their hearts beat as one, their breaths joined, their souls tied forever. The hunters outside screamed in rage as the fortress shook the ground. The ice cracked, the mountains trembled. A wave of fire and frost burst from the fortress, sweeping across the valley. The army was thrown back, their torches dying, their beasts howling in terror. The fortress shone like a star, a beacon in the endless night. The girls stood tall beside him, no longer trembling. Their eyes glowed brighter than ever, their voices strong. We are free, they whispered. The traveler felt the bond burning in his chest, heavy but unbreakable. He was no longer alone. They were his, and he was theirs. The hunters fled into the storm, their cries fading into the distance. The valley grew silent again, the drums gone, the torches dead, the fortress settled, its glow softening, its strength alive but calm. The traveler sank to his knees, his sword slipping from his hand. Exhaustion weighed on him, but warmth filled his chest. The girls knelt beside him, their small hands holding his. You are ours now, the older whispered. You are family, the younger added, her tears falling like stars. The fire burned low, casting gentle light across their faces. The traveler closed his eyes for a moment. He had chosen, and his choice had changed everything. No longer a wanderer, no longer alone. He was bound to them, to their fate, to their world, and together they would face whatever came. He opened his eyes, staring at the stars through the cracks in the fortress roof. The sky was vast, endless, filled with cold light. But for the first time, it did not feel empty. For the first time, he was not just a man walking a lonely road. He was something more, a protector, a bond, a part of something greater than himself. The girls leaned against him, their voices soft. We will never leave your side, they whispered. He wrapped his arms around them, his voice quiet but sure. And I will never leave yours. The fortress glowed faintly, its power alive but at peace. The storm outside faded into silence, and in the heart of the frozen land, 3 lives burned with new fire. A man who bought 2 alien girls for a single drink and found instead a family beyond the stars.